Hey, Jorma.
Garret?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Sorry I missed your call. My fault. I missed your call. Sorry.
It's all good. No problem. We're talking now.
Here we are.
Well,
Awesome.
how's your day going today so far?
My day is awesome today. I've had a great day.
Where are you?
I'm in Virginia Beach.
Oh,
I
cool.
just used my new NutriBullet, made a smoothie, and I'm sitting here with my son. We're thinking about going to the beach. It's a day off.
It's a tough day, right?
It's a rough life, you know.
Well, just to start, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Monterey Pop Festival, and
It does.
I was wondering what that number means to you personally and professionally.
Well, that's a good question. Well, you know, I love these iconic dates. You know, but probably in some ways mean less to me than some people, and in other ways more. For Monterey Pop, that was the first time that us rock and roll guys got respect in an artistic forum. You know, people like, you got reviewed by people that were listening to music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it was like before that, rock and roll was almost a throwaway art form. Folk music was folk music, jazz was jazz. So it was kind of like end of the day when guys like you and me would have a serious conversation about the art of rock and roll. So from that point of view, it was important. The other thing too is that the gathering of that festival was, because we played the Monterey Jazz Festival before that. That whole spirit that existed for a short period of time there back in the 60s was just so evident that this festival. Look back at it, it was very small. There's probably less than 10,000 people there. I don't remember what the numbers are, but there weren't very many. You could just walk through the crowds. I mean, it was a very casual but artful event.
It was kind of one of those things where rock and roll was here to stay.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Now, you're 76. Do you see any
I am.
Rebirth in your thought process these days? Any full circle moments lately?
That's a good question. Well, in a normal world, I'd be a great grandfather, but in this one, I have an 18-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. So I'm constantly, being apprised of the circles of life. On this tour that we're on with Tedeschi Trucks, we're so grateful to them for taking us on board, because we're reaching what tends to be a younger audience that we would then Jack and I or myself would tend to reach by ourselves, So, I mean, the art goes on and on. And one of the things that I think for guys like us, whether it's the Wood brothers or Susan and Derek or me and Jack, or people of our ilk, because we don't make ripples in the pond of the pop world, but it's an enduring art form, in my opinion, and to see the people come out and listen to that and love the music that we present, in my opinion, in an honest way, is inspiring.
Now, with having young kids, are you optimistic about the future?
It's really funny, especially with the way things are going. People are always complaining about stuff. The answer is yes. I'm an eternal optimist. We're going to be okay.
Well, it's one of those things where I feel that nothing's the same, everything's the same, especially with the social issues.
Yeah. Well, I think the social issues, when I was in my late teens and early to mid-20s, were so much more clearly defined, in my opinion, than they are today. I mean, we had the civil rights thing. I mean, things literally were in black and white. The Vietnam War. Things are much more multidimensional today, but I look at, I talk to people that are much younger than myself, and they look at stuff. They're thinking about the environment. They're thinking about the next election. They're really in tune to what's going on, and I have confidence of it.
Well, with that said, I always have this conversation, especially when I tell people that I write a lot about 60s rock and roll, and they say, the 60s were over with Altamont. And I said, well, no, think about how much social progress we've made. I mean, it's not a perfect world, but we're trying to get there.
For sure. I disagree with that. I mean, people, a lot of guys that write, they think about, it started with Monterey and it ended with Altamont.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Altamont was just another festival.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to look at it. And, but I think it's giving too much importance to any of those festivals, really, to say that that's what was going on. I was just, interestingly enough, was reading a bunch of stuff that people said about Woodstock. A lot of the guys at Woodstock thought that that the festival was a drag in a lot of ways, you know. It was muddy, stuff didn't work. I mean, I understand that it gave an identity to my generation back then in a way that may or may not ever happen again. But as a festival, none of us would want to work a gig like that again, ever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was funny is when I was thinking about what I wanted to ask you for the interview, I revisited some of the Woodstock clips of Jefferson Airplane. Do you ever come across those clips? Do you ever look at them? And what do you think if
every
you do?
now and oh, God, that's funny stuff. First of all, you know, I think, I can't believe my friends let me go out dressed like that. No, I mean, no, aside from that kind of stuff. You know, look at stuff like that. And, you know, it's easy to be critical this many years afterwards. I mean, the Airplane in that era, that we were sort of like, you know, in the peak of our life performing. But we went on 18 hours late. Everybody was no sleep, not much food, getting stoned. You know, we could have been better. But that's just how it was. I mean, you know, you really can't go back at it. I find the thing that's so interesting about the Airplane, from my point of view, you know, looking back at it almost as an observer, is that the band at its peak, and I'm not sure the Woodstock was our peak, was a really inventive band. And at our worst, we were an adventuresome band.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering is when you walked off that stage after that show, or maybe when you walked or flew away from Woodstock, if you thought that maybe the world was heading in a better direction.
Well, I mean, first of all, we drove in and out. There's a classic Jim Marshall picture of me sitting on my guitar case with resting my head against my ex-wife's leg, and I looked terrible. I looked shot because we were exhausted by that time. Yeah, I think you know, getting that identity that all of a sudden there's that the counterculture with a massive we. You know, there's that really feeling that maybe there were going to be a lot of changes, and I guess there were in a lot of ways. But you know, that's the way it is with the younger generation. Everybody thinks they're going to change the world.
Yeah, and everyone also thinks that they're the first generation to invent sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was getting there. Yeah, it occurred to me later on that we weren't the first people to invent any of those things.
Yeah. Well, with Hot Tuna, you and Jack have been together for 48 years with that band. What is it?
Right.
What is it that has kept it so vital and vibrant all these years?
Well, Jack and I first started playing together in 1958. Obviously, it wasn't Hot Tuna then, but we've been buddies forever. And I think that what it is that our relationship doesn't depend, thank goodness, on us having a string of hits because we don't do that. We love to play with each other. We're really different people. One of the things is when I'm having an interview, I would say that if you and I and Jack were having a three-way conversation, you would find us to be really different people. But Jack and I, we've never had a band meeting.
Is it kind of like a yin and yang type thing?
Absolutely. You know, we respect each other as men and as artists, and we really just love what it is we do. So that sort of transcends any differences we might have.
What does it mean to still have that friendship on such a deep and personal level these years?
Well, I don't think there's any question he's my oldest living friend now. And that's important because, you know, I'm very fortunate, you know, most of the people that are in my world tend to be younger than me. And friends are friends, you know. But to be friends with people that knew you when you were young, that's a rare thing.
Yeah. Well, with, you know, you've always been involved with the blues. I mean, you know, when I was going through some of those clips, it even with the Airplane, there was so much of a blues influence. What is it about the blues for you that you're able to communicate more from your soul than with maybe other genres?
Well, I think one of the things that attracted me as a youngster to the blues was that in an era when pop music tended to be really insipid, the blues lyrically was about real life events. And that tended not to be the thing in the mid-50s when I started to really get into it. That's not the case now, because now, you know, the writers for modern music are very real about a lot of stuff. But, you know, if you compare how much of that dog in the window to Skip James' Devil Got My Woman, I think that really says it all.
Yeah. What is, you know, with Paul Kantner's recent passing, what do you remember most about him?
Well, you know, Paul's one of these guys that was in many respects was unrecognized as the musical, in many respects, genius that he was.
It's funny that you mentioned that. It's because when I saw that Woodstock clip, I realized how much Paul was involved on stage.
Oh no, I mean his sound. You know, his sound as a rhythm guitar player and part of the rhythm section absolutely defined the sound of the band. I mean, when people talk about it, they talk about Jack and Jorma, and yes, sure, of course, we're all part of the band. But the rhythm section defines the band, really. And Paul, not just as one of the major songwriters, but that rhythm guitar thing that he played was so unlike anybody else. And when we did our Jefferson Airplane sort of a tribute thing at Lock-In in 2015,
yeah.
G. Smith played the Paul parts. He researched Paul for about 6 months and had a 12-string guitar and learned Paul's parts. They're really different, you know, and they're one of the reasons the band sounded the way they did.
Now, if you mind me asking, what's your relationship with Grace and Marty these days?
Well, Marty's had some health issues, and I haven't really spoken to him recently, but our relationship is good. You know, Grace I speak to maybe once every month and a half or so, you know. Her daughter, China, is a friend of mine, and my wife's also. We stay in touch with them. You know, you get to a point where you realize that, you know, the Jack and Paul and Marty and Grace and myself, we're the only ones left, really, from the original core right now. We need to stay in touch with each other.
Yeah. Well, what is the legacy of the Airplane? All these years later, I mean, even when I don't know if you talk about it with Grace about the good old days, but it's got to be surreal to think about how something from such a good place in such an era, in such a crossroads of the history of this country, evolved into such a, you know, crazy proportions of an influence.
Well, you know, Grace is such an iconoclast that this is not a conversation you can have with her, because she would just wouldn't go anywhere. But you know, my wife just sent me this thing. It's a little Patti Smith article on the Jefferson Airplane that was, if you can find it somewhere, that was really interesting to see how somebody else who was a little younger than I am look at what it is that we did. And she talked about the freedom of creation, of creativity that we had as a band. I mean, we were a pop band, absolutely. That's why we're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But we were more than that. You know, obviously, you know, you get together in a commercial band and you want to be popular, but we didn't set out to write hits. You know, everybody wrote from the heart, and we were fortunate that our fans at that time loved what we did. You know.
Yeah.
I think that if I was talking about a legacy that I think the Airplane puts out there for people to look at, it's that to be able to embrace creativity and go somewhere with it, and not to be concerned really with having to make changes based on the fact that, well, this one didn't work. What are we going to do to have a hit? I mean, we really honestly just did what it is that we wanted to do, and fortunately it worked out for us.
Well, my final question is, what is the life performing and traveling the world and creating music and interacting with people? What does that taught you about what it means to be a human being?
Well, my dad was in the service when I was a kid, so we traveled around a lot. I've lived in third world countries and all this kind of stuff. And I guess what I've taken away from all this without really focusing on it is that folks are folks, people are people, you know. And to be able to communicate via music, there's an ability that transcends language in a lot of respects. I mean, obviously the words are words, but I listen to a lot of world music which in some language that, you know, the 1,500 people in some corner of the universe speak or something like that. And whether you can understand it or not, the music communicates in a powerful way. I think nothing evokes a place in time or an emotional feeling better than music. And again, people are people, and we can communicate through music without words.